Well, boom, what a day it has been. It started off early and it started off often. You had Pierre Poilievre drop in a press conference today an announcement saying we need to clamp down on our overflowing, out of control immigration system. And he took specific eye at the temporary foreign workers program. And he dropped a lot of truth bombs today. The left-wing media wasn't happy with what he had to say about it. And he made a statement today that I never thought I would hear coming out of a conservative's mouth when it comes to this specific program. And it was intense. It was wild. And we're going to get into what he said, the response to what he said, Mark Carney talking about what he had to say, and we're getting into all of it today. Welcome to the Elevate Podcast. I'm your host, Josh. If you get any value from today's episode, take the time to like, share, and subscribe. It helps us to grow, helps us to get to new audiences, and helps people see that there's a different option than what the mainstream media has to offer. Now, let's get into our first story, shall we? As I said, it was about a half-hour press conference today. And Pierre Poilievre made a lot of comments, a lot of statements that are very newsworthy. But I really wanted to hone in on one specific thing he said because it actually is very intriguing, the fact that he said this. What he said today, and this 2-minute clip I'm going to show you, is demanding Mark Carney completely scrap the temporary foreign workers program.
The Liberals have to answer. Why is it that they're shutting our own youth out of jobs and replacing them with low-wage temporary foreign workers from poor countries who are ultimately being exploited? And let us say as well, the people, the individual temporary foreign workers, the workers themselves, they are not bad people. They are not the problem. They are being taken advantage of by liberal corporate elites who want to use them to drive down wages. And of course, we continue to support the dream of all immigrants to Canada, immigrants who come here to be Canadian, to get a job, work hard, contribute, and live a good life. That is part of the Canadian promise, and that is not what we're addressing here today. We're addressing a program that temporarily brings people from low-wage countries to replace Canadians and drive down the wages of our people. The time has come for decisive action to stop the Liberals from using our immigration system to pad the pockets of corporate elites and other insiders at the expense of Canadian jobs. Again, the principle is very simple. The principle is very simple. Canadian jobs for Canadian workers. Canada first, Canada always. That's why Conservatives are calling on the Carney government to permanently scrap the temporary foreign worker program and to stop issuing visas for any new temporary foreign workers coming into the country.
So you heard it right there. He wants Mark Carney's government to permanently scrap the temporary foreign workers program because, well, it's gotten out of control. Like what we've seen in the US and we're seeing up here, where we've seen a lot of bloated government take over and a lot of inefficiencies come with it. Because the temporary foreign worker program started in 1973. And it started well under like 1,000 workers that were actually only used for high-skilled labor, academics, professionals, technical experts, what have you. And they were used very, very sparingly starting in the 70s. But like any government program or any program in general, as time goes on, it starts being used and abused and used in ways it never was meant to be used in the first place. As I said, it started in the 70s. And it was also used heavily in the 80s. But again, more for that high-skilled laborers for very temporary moments in time where Canadians couldn't fill the gap. But then in 1992, in the 90s, it started being used and broadened to the agricultural sector, to pick berries, to work the farmlands, this, that, the other. And as time went on into the 2000s, it kept growing and growing into now what we see today, the hospitality industry. And it kept growing and growing and growing and growing. And the reason why I thought it was really interesting, because again, it started in the 70s, it kind of had a good lockdown for about 15, 20 years. And then 90s hits, 2000s, it just gets out of control, spanning over many different administrations, different parties, and different governments. And that's why I was very surprised hearing Pierre Poilievre say that today, saying we want him to permanently scrap the temporary foreign worker program. Because in some ways, the Harper government highly utilized the program as well. And this was the shot across the bow for me. This was the moment where if Poilievre holds true to what he believes here, or at least saying he believes here, he really is in it for the workers. He really is fighting for the blue collar. He is fighting for the regular person right now. Because that actually, even then, typically isn't a conservative stance to take. But to come out boldly and saying we need to scrap the temporary foreign worker program, that's a position someone like Jack Layton would have taken. And I think you're starting to see how much things have changed politically in our country. And Poilievre said it perfectly there too. This program is clearly only benefiting elites and big companies to benefit from essentially very low wage jobs that they can pay people pennies and the government will subsidize the rest. And is being used to drive down wages here in our country so that the big corporations can get maximum value out of the worker and give minimum back. That's what we're seeing. And Pierre Poilievre, with the likes of Michelle Rempel-Garner today, made that announcement loud and clear. So much so that Ezra Levant of Rebel News asked a very bold question today. He asked, will you be open to shaming and naming the companies that have abused so disgustingly this program, including the likes of a Canadian brand, or at least former Canadian brand, in Tim Hortons? And that's what Pierre Poilievre had to say to that.
Naming and shaming in the public domain abusers of the TFW program.
Yes, and thank you for the question. Michelle Rempel has already begun the process. She's been publishing the most egregious cases of corporate elites profiting by shutting Canadians out of jobs in favor of low-wage temporary foreign workers. And Michelle, do you want to add anything to that?
Sure.
Come on over.
Here comes the heat right here.
No, thanks for the question, Ezra. It's absolutely egregious that these companies expect that they can just maximize corporate profits on the backs of and at the expense of Canadian youth. It's a practice that has to end. We've been naming and shaming them all week. I want to thank my team for finding those examples, but I encourage Canadians to go and look for themselves. There's been websites that have been set up so that people can see what these companies are doing. But the more important thing is, Ezra, that the Liberals are letting them do this. The Liberals are totally letting them do this. You know, Lena Diab, where was she this summer, the immigration minister? Did she name and shame any of these people? No, she didn't. And that's why we're here today. We're standing up for the people that are behind us. Enough is enough. Canadian jobs have to go to Canadians.
Boom. Plain and simple. Canadian jobs need to go to Canadians. Fairly simple. And to seeing the passion, the conviction, and the clarity spoken on this, I think was amazing. Especially see Poilievre get up and saying, I want to make this very clear. We are not getting upset and taking aim at the foreign workers themselves. It's the fact that they're being exploited and are being used to drive down wages of Canadians in our country. And it needs to end. And it needs to end now. For 2025, that's a very bold statement to make. It's unfortunate that it is seen as bold, but it's the reality that we're currently living in. And with that being said, with him and Michelle Rempel-Garner laying down the law on this specific issue, Mark Carney was asked, what are your thoughts? Do you agree with scrapping the temporary foreign workers program? Poilievre says it's a tool that's being used to prop up a lot of the liberal elites, were Poilievre's exact words. What do you have to say about that, Mark Carney?
Mr. Poilievre called this morning on the government to scrap the temporary foreign worker program. Is it time to shut the program down?
Well, I would say the following, which is that that program has a role. It has to be focused in terms of its role. And it's part of what we're reviewing. It's part of what we will be discussing, how well the temporary foreign worker program is working and how our overall immigration system is working. We've been absolutely clear as a government that we want, and we're putting in place policies so that the overall level of immigration as proportion of the population will decline from around 7% today to around 5% several years from now. Now, the biggest contributor to immigration is not temporary foreign workers, it's a variety of other factors. And I will say, et je vais répéter en français parce que c'est important, when I talk to businesses around the country, particularly in Quebec, but elsewhere across the country, their number one issue is tariffs, and their number two issue is access to temporary foreign workers. Okay?
He's just saying it out loud now for everyone to hear. Big things I'm hearing is big corporations, essentially, is what he's getting at, are the tariffs, and then access to temporary foreign workers. Access to cheap labor is what we need. Not figure out how we can make our system work so that it employs Canadians. No, our corporations are demanding of our government that they have access to cheap labor. And he's saying, yeah, we got to make that work for them. He said it loud and clear for you to hear. You know, and the argument is, well, there are jobs that just will not be filled by Canadians. And to that, I'm like, yeah, I understand that. However, sometimes the pendulum has to swing so very hard for it to get the point to get across. And I think I agree at this point of completely shutting down that program and renewing it under something different where the rules and regulations are back to being as strict as they once were when the program was first introduced into our country. The program under the TFW, Temporary Foreign Worker Program, needs to end, and needs to end now. And I do understand, again, there are situations where it is necessary. However, program needs to be restarted under something anew with tangible, clear set out guidelines. But of course, Mark Carney is the globalist. Mark Carney is the man who advocates for big business, who moves his businesses to the United States out of Canada because it's more beneficial to his pocketbook. So of course he's going to take the side of the big companies who want cheap labor and continuing to abuse the system and pillaging our country and all the value that comes with it. They won't think twice about moving things to China, moving things to the United States. They'll never build here unless they're able to abuse our systems. And Mark Carney is allowing them to do it. There's one last thing I want to share. And it was Mark Carney talking about the deficit, talking about getting debt under control. And he had some very profound things to say about this in this 2-minute clip.
Spending as a whole at over 7% a year on average for over a decade. That's twice the rate of growth of the economy on average. It's not a sustainable situation. So we need to rein in spending. We need to find efficiencies. We're in the process of finding efficiencies. One of the big elements of the discussions over the next 2 days will be about those efficiencies. It won't be the final discussion of that. We'll continue to work on this right up to the budget. So we need to do that. But at the same time, we need to invest as a country. And it's finding those efficiencies. It's the responsible thing to do with Canadians' money. This is Canadians' money. It's not the government's money. It's a responsible thing to do with that. But in finding those efficiencies, we create the room for these big investments. And the key to our strategy for investing, whether it's Build Canada Homes or these major projects, I can give you other examples, but look at those two, because you'll be hearing more about both of those in the coming weeks, is that the federal government, sometimes working with the provinces, but government, there's a bit of measures to catalyze investment, to catalyze enormous private investment. And that's how we get the big multipliers, and that's how we're going to give ourselves more than anyone else can take away. Madame.
So did you understand what he had to say there? Because I didn't. I was being facetious to set that one up. It was going to be a whole lot of nothing. He was talking about how our inflation rate is far outpacing our economic growth. And that's not good. However, went on to kept talking about how he's going to keep spending and spending and spending and running up the bill. Has no intention of fixing it. Has no intention of fixing really anything. But he will stand up there in front of cameras, sound good, try to sound eloquent, try to sound like he knows what he's talking about. And a lot of people fall for it. And this is the case, and this is the reality we live in. You have to be patient, take the time, call it the BS. Because the minute you start sounding crazy is the minute the population tunes you out and they keep falling for this type of garbage. But anyways, that's it for me. Have yourselves a good one. I'm out.